So in this lesson, I'm going to go over graphing, but then I'm also going to review some key math skills that I'm going to assume you know throughout this course. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to graph. And so I'm going to take a second, I'm going to actually open up Excel and I'm going to show you how to graph this, but just to introduce the concept, what I have here is I'm wanting you to create an Excel graph in order to plot the data that I collect based on how the distance I walk affects how much my dog Toby consumes. And so I've got my data here. And so what I'm going to do, because I have two different sets of numerical values, I'm going to create a scatter plot. If instead you had one set of numerical data and then categories like blue, green, yellow, or anything qualitative, then you would use a bar graph. So what I did before I started this video was I plugged in my x coordinates, which represent the distance in miles that Toby has walked, and then the y coordinates are the amount of kibble that he ate, the cups, because what I'm trying to show is that the amount that he walks can be correlated with how much he eats. All right, so what I'm going to do, notice I didn't write the labels on top of these because you don't need them. What you're going to do is you're simply going to select this, making sure this is your X, this is your Y, because otherwise it'll flip it. Then I'm going to go to charts and I want a scatter plot. So I'm going to click on scatter plot and I'm going to write marked scatter plot. Okay? So here's my graph so far. Now, a lot of students will just turn this in and they'll be done, but you're missing quite a bit of things. The first thing that you're missing are your axes. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to chart layout. And as you notice here, it shows chart title and axis title. Now, this is going to be different from a non-Mac computer, but all of these have very similar labels. So as long as you can find them on your computer, they might be up here, you're fine. So just make sure to be able to locate where these are. So I'm going to add a title above this. Now, my title should indicate what I was studying. So what I was studying was how walking distance affects food consumption. Now you know that what I'm studying is how the amount that my dog walks affects how much food he eats. Okay, so it shows very clearly what we're interested in. I'm going to go now to the horizontal axis, and I need to label that. Now my horizontal axis is distance walked, and I need to include the units in parentheses, so it's going to be miles. Okay, then I'm going to go to my y-axis, okay, and my y-axis is going to be amount of kibble consumed, and that's going to be the units are cups. Okay, so unless I ask for anything more, if you're creating a scatter plot, that's all you need. However, there is one more thing that you can do, and that's adding a trend line. So what you can do is click on your points, okay, and then you can go here and it says trend line. Now that looks pretty linear to me. Let's see if it's a linear trend. Okay, so notice there's a linear trend. There seems to be a correlation between how much Toby walks versus how much he eats. The other thing I can do, if I go to Trendline options, and I go to options right there, display equation on chart, which I will ask you to do for some of your labs. So now if you notice, I've got an equation here that represents this line. Now on PCs, what you often have to do is click on your data points and then control click in order to get the add trend line and add your equation specifically. But this is the amount of information that I need if I ask you to create a graph on Excel. So make sure that you're comfortable doing that on whatever computer you have, and if you're not, bring your computer in with you and we can go over how to create a scatter plot. So now that we've gone over graphing, we're going to go over some key math skills that I assume you know, and so this should be a nice review. If it's not, just come in, we'll review in class, but then also you can ask for more help. So the first thing is identifying place values. So the way I'm going to do this and explain this is simply to provide you with two examples. So for the first one, it asks you to identify the place values for 4,512. And so 4, what place value that is the thousands place value. The 5 is the hundreds, the 1 is the tens, and then the 2 is the ones. Another example here, now I'm going to go into decimals. So the 2, again, is the ones. The 0 now, instead of the tens, it is the tenths. The 9 is the hundredths. And the 8 is the thousandths. Okay, so notice if you go to the right of the decimal place, you add a th to it. If you're to the left of the decimal place, then it's just the regular hundreds, thousands, tens, etc. The next thing for you to know is how to calculate a percentage. So I can either give you a fraction or a decimal. In these examples, I give you a fraction. So the first thing that you need to do is take 2 and divide it by 16 to get a decimal. And when I do that in my calculator, I get 0.125. Now, we'll be using decimals. However, if you want to write it as a percent, 0.125, in order to make it a percent per 100, what you need to do is move that decimal place over 2 places to the right in order to make it a percent. So if I move that decimal place over 2 places, it gives me 12.5%. The next concept, math-wise, is solving equations. And so in this example, I'm going to be solving for h. So keep in mind, if I take, one of the things you might want to do right away is take 2h and divide it by 2 to get rid of that 2 because I'm solving for h. Well, the problem is you would need to divide everything here by 2. So instead, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to isolate my h, meaning I'm going to get rid of that 13. And since I'm subtracting by 13, to get rid of it, I'm going to do the opposite process. So I'm going to add 13 to both sides. So that gets me 2h equals 34. Now I can divide by 2 easily. Just divide both sides by 2, and I get h equals 17. Okay? Next concept is just some calculator skills. Now, if I give you a problem like this, it looks really easy. You'll plug it into your calculator, and then you'll end up with a positive exponent. But you shouldn't get a positive exponent. If we think about it logically, if I am dividing my entire answer by 10 to the 10th, that should give me a negative exponent, meaning a very small number. So what you probably did if you got a positive exponent is you took 120, multiplied it by 56, divided by 6.2, and then multiplied by 10 to the 10th. But that's not what I'm wanting to do. I'm wanting to divide by 6.2 times 10 to the 10th. So what you need to do in your calculator is when you're dividing by anything with a multiplication sign, you need to put that in parentheses because otherwise your calculator is going to assume that you're dividing by 6.2 and then multiplying the entire thing by 10 to the 10th. So use brackets or use parentheses around 6.2 times 10 to the 10th when you're dividing. And what you should get, and check yourself to make sure you get this, you should get 1.1 times 10 to the negative 7th.